In the summer of 1994, an unknown substance fell from the sky over a small Washington town. People got sick, animals died, and scientists found answers, but they only deepened the questions. Oakville in Washington is the kind of town that knows rain. Nestled in Grays Harbor County, it sees rainfall for the better part of the year. A relentless, regular drizzle that residents long ago stopped noticing. Police officer David Lacey certainly wasn't thinking anything unusual when the rain started up again in the early hours of August 7th, 1994. But then he turned on his windshield wipers. Instead of clearing the glass, they smeared it. Something thick and viscous was coating his cruiser, not beading and running like water, but clinging. Officer Lacey pulled into a gas station and, with a caution that would later prove wise, pulled on a pair of latex gloves and began poking at the strange substance. What he found on his windshield was gelatinous, translucent, and utterly unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. "This isn't right. This isn't normal," he said to himself. He had no idea how right he was. By the time dawn broke over Oakville, it was clear that whatever had fallen in the night had fallen everywhere. Dottie Hearn, a local resident who lived on a 29-acre farm with her daughter, Sunny Barcliffe, stepped outside and found what she initially mistook for hailstones scattered across her outbuildings and woodpile. When she reached down and touched them with her bare hands, she realized her mistake immediately. They were soft, gelatinous, and slightly translucent, each one roughly the size of half a grain of rice. They covered every surface: the ground, the roof, the car. An entire landscape coated in something that had no business being there. The substance fell that day across an estimated 20 square miles of Grays Harbor County, and then, over the following 3 weeks, it fell again, and again, and again. 6 times in total, the same gelatinous material descended on Oakville. Whatever this was, it was not a one-off anomaly. It just kept coming back. The illness arrived quickly. By the afternoon of August 7th, hours after the first fall, residents were reporting symptoms that were impossible to dismiss. Dottie Hearn was found collapsed on her bathroom floor, conscious but barely. Her daughter described her as pale, cold, and drenched in sweat. She complained of extreme dizziness, blurry vision, and had been vomiting. Dottie was rushed to hospital, where she would remain for 3 days. Officer Lacey, despite having worn gloves, reported becoming violently ill with fatigue and nausea after clearing the blobs off his windshield. Other residents also described difficulty breathing, extreme vertigo, and blurred vision. Local doctors in the area reported a spike in patients coming in suffering from inner ear problems and respiratory issues. Resident Beverly Roberts would later describe the scale of it. Virtually everyone in town, she said, contracted a flu-like illness in the weeks that followed. And for many, some symptoms lingered for 2 to 3 months after the exposure. Beverly herself was one of the stricken residents. After collecting a sample, she awoke the following morning suffering severe vertigo and had to dress on the floor because she was so unsteady. She described literally crawling to her car and carefully driving to the doctor's office, where she was promptly hospitalized for a week. It wasn't just people that were affected either. Cats and dogs that had come into contact with the substance fell ill and failed to recover. Dottie Hearn's newly adopted kitten died within days, following a battle with severe intestinal problems. Beverly reported knowing of at least 12 animals that had perished since the blobs first appeared. When she had gone to collect the sample before she fell ill, she had found a dead frog and a dead raven lying just feet away from where she picked the substance up from. The pattern was hard to ignore. Every time the substance fell, people and animals got sick. Sonny Barclift, who worked in occupational health and safety and had collected the samples whilst wearing gloves, understood instinctively that this needed to go somewhere official. She sent samples to multiple agencies: the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Ecology, and eventually the Washington State Department of Health. The results that came back were simultaneously illuminating and baffling. At the hospital, a lab technician examined the substance under a microscope and reported finding human white blood cells. That finding, alarming as it sounds, was subsequently challenged by state-level analysis. Scientists at the Washington State Department of Ecology, led by scientist Mike Osweiler, determined that the cells present had no nuclei, and human white blood cells have nuclei. So whatever these cells were, they could not, on that basis, be human white blood cells. Osweiler reported to the New York Times on August 20th, 1994, that the substance had once been alive, but its precise origin remained unidentified. The more significant findings came from the Washington State Department of Health, where microbiologist Mike McDowell cultured the substance on bacterial media to see what would grow. 2 species of bacteria emerged: Pseudomonas fluorescens and Enterobacter cloacae. The latter is known to inhabit the human digestive tract and can, under certain conditions, cause infections of the lungs, blood, and urinary tract. McDowell wanted to investigate further. He believed he was onto something. He returned to his lab, and the samples were gone. In 30 years of service, McDowell later stated he had never lost a sample. When he raised it with his superiors, he was told, in his own words, "Do not ask." The samples were never recovered. No further official testing was ever carried out. One of the first explanations proposed was that the substance was concentrated fluid waste from an airplane toilet. Sonny Barclift contacted the Federal Aviation Administration, who were unequivocal in their response. Regulations stipulate that commercial aircraft toilet fluids are dyed blue, and the blobs were clear, not blue. Furthermore, airplanes don't usually just dump their toilet contents wherever, and if it had been some kind of accident, it wouldn't have happened 6 times over a 3-week period. Then there was the star jelly theory. This refers to a naturally occurring gelatinous substance occasionally found on the ground. Historically, it was attributed to meteor showers, but in reality the substance is sourced from everything from algae to amphibians. But this substance cannot account for the uniformity of the Oakville blobs, the fact that it fell from the sky, or the pattern of 6 falls across a specific geographic area. The jellyfish theory holds that US Air Force bombing runs over the Pacific Ocean may have destroyed a school of jellyfish, sending biological matter high into the atmosphere and eventually down on Oakville. The Air Force acknowledged the bombing runs, but denied any knowledge or connection to the substance. The theory itself struggles against basic logistics. Jellyfish and Oakville are separated by 50 miles of terrain. The substance fell 6 times over 3 weeks, and local residents noted a complete absence of any smell of decay, which pulverized ocean life would certainly produce. Which leaves the theory that McDowell himself arrived at. In interviews conducted after his retirement, and in notes reviewed by his family before his death in 2020, he described the substance as appearing to be manufactured. An envelope, a matrix, a delivery system, potentially capable of carrying a virus or bacteria. He was careful to say he had no proof, but he was also a respected government microbiologist with 3 decades of experience, not a man given to wild speculation. This material, he said, was manufactured by someone for some purpose, and for some reason, Oakville was chosen as the test site. In the years that followed, Sunny Barclift has spoken publicly about her belief that the Oakville event was connected to military activity. She has described, in accounts that have circulated widely, but remain unverified by independent sources, observing unusual military activity in the area in the period before the blobs fell. She's also described an encounter several years after the incident, in which 3 men arrived at her workplace and questioned her about the 1994 events. Men whose vehicle was allegedly traced back to a military base over 2,000 miles away in Texas. 30 years on, there are no samples left to test. Many of the key figures are gone. McDowell died in 2020, and with him whatever further conclusions he might have reached. All locals are left with are memories and unanswered questions. A community that experienced something it could not explain. A scientific investigation that reached a disturbing preliminary conclusion and was then shut down. And an official silence so complete that it's become, for many, more unnerving than any answer could be. Oakville still gets about 150 days of rain a year. Residents still look up when the weather turns. Some of them, reportedly, still look a little longer than they used to.